Welcome, everyone. Welcome to week two of this creative cycle series where we'll be discovering the different elements of the creative cycle. Last week, we explored the water element that is related to the phase and the stage of preconception. And this week, as we enter into week two, what we'll be doing is we'll dive into the wood element and a little bit about how we can transform pressure and stress to succeed into playfulness and into possibility. But before that, if this is the first time we're meeting, I want to extend a warm welcome. My name is Wenling, and I am a mindfulness, productivity, and creativity coach. And here, as part of my channel, with regards to this series, we are discovering the five elements of the creative cycle and how it relates to the different challenges you might be facing as you go about doing. For example, if you are an entrepreneur, you might be working on your side hustle or your startup. If you are an artist, a writer, a creator, you might experience various different obstacles as you are going about your creations. So if you happen to be tuning in live, share in the chat and let me know that you're tuning in, as well as any specific questions you might have with regards to the creative cycle as well. I'm going to leave a couple of moments and then we're going to dive right into this week with regards to the wood element. All right, so last week we looked at the water element, which, as I mentioned from before, because within the creative cycle, there's really no beginning and no end. If we had to pick a place to start, the water element would be a pretty good place to start. And that's because it's closest to the source. And also because the water element is related to the phase of ideation or preconception. If you happen to know someone or you yourself work in the technology or the design industry, then you might be familiar with the various different stages, moving from ideation all the way until having the first minimum viable product, the smallest version of whatever it is you want to launch, or your very first draft of a book, or maybe your artwork, for example. So that was a water element. And in last week, what we looked at in the water element phase is how to transform this fear into fuel and faith. Because what happens at the water element stage and phase is very often we experience fear. And this is what is holding us back from actually taking inspired yet imperfect action. So, this week, as we dive into the wood element, a little bit about the transformation of water into wood. When we water a seed, it begins to take root. It begins to germinate and sprout and grow. And in due time, with the sufficient and the adequate conditions. So, not just sufficient, but also ripe conditions. So, they have to be of a minimum quantity and also quality as well in terms of sunshine, rain, nutrients in the soil. Then the seed will begin to grow and it will emerge above the surface of the soil and become manifest. This is very similar to our ideas as well. So we might start off with a idea that's in our mind, and only with sufficient work, both inner work that we put inside ourselves, that we work on with regards to releasing our self-limiting beliefs, questioning, allowing time to for this idea to develop, and then also outer work, meaning setting aside time to actually do the writing, setting aside to actually work on the business proposal, for example. This is what will support this seed to begin to emerge. And now the wood element, it grows with this force and strength, and within the creative cycle, it is the moment when, after a long dormant phase, and the winter season is associated with the water element, with this very dormant receiving energy, right, we begin to shift, and at the peak of this yin energy, which is very soft, very allowing, the yang energy begins to rise. And as the yang energy rises, yin energy descends. And this is the transitional moment when the wood element energy emerges. So if we look at the stages of creation, if water element is ideation, then the wood element really is the phase of connecting with your vision and the phase of beginning to have some form of plan or some form of series of steps moving ahead so that you can begin to transform what is invisible, what is non manifest, into something manifest and tangible in the world. I'll give you an example. So, for example, last week when we looked at the water element, right, many of us write a book or have an art exhibition or perhaps start an organization because we have a message that we want to share with the world. Or perhaps there's something in the world that we feel could be improved, an area that doesn't seem quite right, that we maybe notice that there's a problem and we want to solve this problem through our actions. So that's the intention, which is really the water element connecting with your message and your why, and this idea that is driving your action. Then, when we come to the wood element phase, it is really about connecting with the vision and the possibility of how this might manifest. If we look at the example of maybe writing, if there's a message you've been wanting to convey, you might have considered various different ways this might be communicated. Might this be a blog post? Or maybe a series of blog posts that is on your blog that's living virtually? Might it be a quarterly virtual newsletter or magazine? Maybe it is a novel, a science fiction novel, or maybe it is a trilogy, or perhaps it becomes a play. So there are various different ways or methods in a tangible sense that this message might be conveyed either overtly or in a more subtle way. And this is really what we are exploring here in the wood element phase, the possible ways something might manifest or transform from non manifest into a more tangible way. And so the wood element energy is connected with the energy of springtime, which is what many of us in the northern hemisphere we've been experiencing for a couple of months now. And maybe you've already started to feel the beginning of summer season and this heat. I'm based in Turin, Italy, and here it is really starting to get very, very warm. So also in the moon phases, right, the wood element energy is associated with the waxing moon phase. So after new moon, what happens is the light of the moon begins to grow and expand, and this is the energy of the wood element. So the wood element energy is really very creative. It is a rising kind of energy that supports you to begin to prepare to take action. And here I mentioned there are two main aspects of the wood element from before. The first part is vision. In Chinese medicine, which is the origins of this creative cycle and the five elements, right? Chinese medicine theory or philosophy associates the wood element with the orifices of the eyes. And often in English, we say that the eyes are the windows to one's soul, right? Through which we can see everything. And also when it comes to projects, to, for example, even your future, we might say, oh, yeah, I see that I can have a future with this person. Or I can see that in this job or in this position, I do see a future of how it might unfold. And this is really what we mean when we connect with the wood element, strength, and energy with regards to this creation process. Seeing the full possibilities of how this idea, how this message, how this thing that is really important to you might take shape in the real world. And the second aspect of the wood element energy is with regards to planning. Now, very often when we begin to take action, it is always helpful to have some kind of understanding of the series of steps that we might need to take, perhaps in a sequential order, perhaps not in a sequential order. Some things will be need to unfold around the same time. But in any sense, because we live and we experience time in a linear way, having this planning and having some kind of structure, some kind of logical unfolding, or a sense of how things need to be done in a certain order will help you as later on when you begin to enter into the fire element phase, which is what we will explore in the next week. Then that will give you that sense of security and safety so that you can dive right into the action taking without second guessing yourself. And perhaps you might have heard of this saying, fail to plan, plan to fail. And this is also what we are talking about when it comes to the wood element. When we have a clear vision, and when we truly believe in the message and the intention behind this vision, then this gives us this agency. It gives us this drive to begin to fuel this into a blueprint and a series of steps that we can then take to realize your dream, to achieve your goals. And this, when in balance, is the energy of the wood element. Now, I did say that today we're going to focus on how to transform pressure into possibility and play. And this is the other side of the wood element. So, when the wood element is out of balance, it can manifest as the emotion of anger. It can surface in the form of frustration, impatience, and to the extreme opposite end, a sense of helplessness, a feeling that things are outside of your control and there's nothing you can really do in this given situation to change or to make a difference. And we see this often in the realm of social justice, or even, for example, in climate change. And there are some activists who are very passionate and they work on something for a period of time. And then they feel that, oh, after a period of time of putting in their efforts, they may not notice a change. And this would result in that feeling of helplessness. So let's talk a little bit about pressure, also because wood element is associated with this drive to want to change and transform and to rise and see this change manifested in the world. This often accompanies, alongside with this, often is this feeling of stress and pressure to really want to not do a disservice to this message. You really want to make sure that very often there's a hope that our actions can realize the full intention and the potential of the idea that you might be holding on to, that you want to see manifest in the world. And this can sometimes then translate into pressure and this stress to have to achieve, to succeed very early on during this cycle. It might be already in the first cycle or the first time you're doing something that you feel this pressure to succeed. And I can share from my personal experience, being someone who is very much predominantly of the wood element. I also share in some of my other resources, including a course that's called Uncover Your Five Element Personality Archetype, that there are various different elements also present within us. Right? We have a predisposition, and based on our constitution, you may have a dominant type of element within you. And for me, I'm very much of a wood element dominant type. So I often feel this stress and pressure to not want to let down my idea and let down that intention because of the limitations in my possibility and my ability and capability to execute, to do something to realize that idea or to fulfill that intention. And so this might be you the first time you are beginning to work on your side hustle, which could be a business, or the first time you are beginning to write your book or create a series of artworks for an exhibition, you might feel a lot of pressure to succeed, to achieve the kind of success, maybe for yourself, and maybe instead for your message, for your intention, whatever that is. So, this is really counterproductive because this layers on and creates an unnecessary additional burden and stress that holds you back from tapping into the full possibility of the wood element. And so there's a really helpful and powerful shift here that I'm going to share with you today that I encourage you to do, that you can explore anytime you notice when you are engaging in an endeavor and it's starting to get too stressful. You're starting to feel a sense of overwhelm and you feel a lot of pressure to succeed early on during the stages. Perhaps you might be only in the ideation or the visioning stage, and already you feel this pressure to succeed. Then, if that's the case, observe and notice and hold your horses. It's time to take a pause and take a step back before moving on into execution. Because if you don't take care of this and do this shift before you move into execution, you bring this pressure with you into the later stages. And also, you don't get to harness the full possibility of the wood element. I did say within the creative cycle that each of these elements and stages has different energetic qualities. So the water element is very much about faith and patience and allowing and being with the idea and cultivating a deep sense of unshakable trust through your intuition, connecting with what it is you know you have to do no matter what. So it's a more dormant and quiet kind of energy. But when we reach the wood element, it's really rising and it's almost expansive. It's reaching towards the fire element where the full possibility of everything exists. And so when we are not unnecessarily stressed or pressured in order to succeed, we can tap into the full possibility of Wood's playfulness, Wood's possibility, which is exactly what is helpful when we move from this preconception stage into that visioning and almost ideation stage. Because here, what happens is you might be brainstorming. And as you're brainstorming for all the possibilities for how you might begin to take an idea and an intention, which is non manifest, into a tangible form, a method where it can be shared with the world, whether it is a book, a blog, a podcast, whatever that is, you really don't want to unnecessarily limit yourself because the sky is the limit. Everything is possible, and there's no stupid idea. It is an opening up energy rather than a narrowing down energy. And what happens is if we already start to concern ourselves with this pressure to succeed, that narrows down and constricts this expansive and rising energy. So, how can we then alchemize and transform this stress and pressure into this joyful, into this curious, playful kind of energy? First, by noticing when you feel the pressure and reminding yourself that this might be the first time you're endeavoring to do something, and that it won't be the last time, and therefore it is not about success at this moment. It is more important to consider the full possibilities of what could be. And also, very importantly, rather than seeing it as only having two specific outcomes, meaning I succeed or I fail, that there is actually a full range of various different outcomes and possibilities. It's more of a sliding scale. It's also moving from that place of I have to achieve into that place of I'm here to experiment and play and putting on this experimenter's hat to see the possibility of what could be. Now, from here, right, as you move into that expansiveness, really also connecting with the possibility and the excitement and the agency this vision could give you, because this will then become fuel for you as you move from the wood element into the fire element. Now, when we chop wood, these planks of wood become fuel for fire. So you don't want to stifle the wood from fully growing. And wood needs space to breathe, to grow, to expand. If you've ever seen a plant, a flower, a tree, a living being, it needs space. Both physical space and, in a sense, spiritual space, and also mineral space are all kinds of possibility for this rising, both upwards but also expansion later on when we reach the fire element. So this is what we are exploring here in the wood element today. And I'm going to leave a couple of moments in case we have anyone live who's tuning in who has any questions that they'd like to share or comment before we wrap up the session. And then I will also share some information about the coming week as well. All right, it looks like we don't have any friends who are tuning in live. So thank you so much if you are watching this on replay. As always, if you have any queries, any questions, anything that's specific to where you are on your creative journey, whether you are launching a business, growing a business, or perhaps you are doing something more creative, you are writing a book, you are preparing for an exhibition, and you are encountering some obstacles that relate to what we explore here in this Creative Cycle series, you are always welcome to drop me a message on my social media, or you can leave a comment here on YouTube on any of my videos, as well as drop me an email at wenling@wenlingtan.com. And I've just popped that in the chat. You can also find out more about the creative cycle on my website, wenlingtan.com. The link is in the chat, as well as if you are looking for one-on-one support to overcome the obstacles that you might be facing with regards to procrastination, perfectionism that's holding you back from realizing your full creative potential. I am here to be of support. You can always drop me a message to find out more about what it's like to work with me and if it is a good fit. So, thank you so much for being here with me. And I hope you have a wonderful, expansive, and joyful rest of your day, weekend, evening. And I'll see you soon.